ЧВК «Вагнер» хотели расформировать. Мы вышли 23 июня на марш справедливости.
The Wagner Group is a collection of private military companies working in conjunction with the headquarters element. The group operated in the shadows for many years, handling paramilitary duties on behalf of Vladimir Putin and augmenting Russian forces. On June 24, 2023, General Prigozhin, the head of the 25,000-strong Wagner mercenary group, withdrew from operations in the Ukraine and demanded the resignation of the country's top defense officials over alleged failures in the war in Ukraine. Yevgeny Prigozhin said his fighters had led a forced march for justice that saw them travel from the southern city of Rostov-on-Don to the outskirts of Moscow before it would end. Who is General Yevgeny Prigozhin? What is the history of the Wagner Group? Why would they fight for and then turn on Putin?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
General Yevgeny Prigozhin was born June 1, 1961 in St. Petersburg, Russia. He was arrested in 1978 for robbery and again in 1981 for choking a woman while his friends stole her jewelry. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. After his release from prison in 1991, he entered the food sales and restaurant business, where he started Concord Catering, becoming friends with Vladimir Putin. He received the contract to supply food to the Russian military. This was when he started the Wagner Group with its co-founders. The Wagner Group got its name from its primary founder, Dmitry Valeryevich Heaton, a former officer in Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU. Heaton's covert call sign was Wagner, with some saying that it alluded to his pro-Nazi ideology and used the name of Adolf Hitler's favorite composer, Richard Wagner. He was a lieutenant colonel and brigade commander of a unit of Spetsnaz GRU, the 700th Independent Spetsnaz Detachment of the 2nd Independent Brigade, and he retired from the Russian security services in 2013. In 2013, Heaton began working for the Moran Security Group, a private company founded by Russian military veterans, and were involved in security and training missions worldwide, specializing in security against piracy at sea. The actual command structure placed former operatives Igor Kostyakov and former head of Russian SSO Alexei Dyumin in overall command, with Yevgeny Prigozhin primarily handling recruitment and training until the invasion of Ukraine. This group also served to protect the oil fields in Syria, and after that ended, he started the Wagner Group in 2014 and remained as the senior military command advisor. The Wagner Group is very diversified through various other shadow corporations such as Concord Management and Consulting and Concord Catering to assist in hiding their activities. The group trains their personnel at a Russian MOD facility, Kino, Krasnodar Krai, which is labeled as a children's camp, and active-duty Russian military personnel conduct the training for all new hires, and most of his longtime soldiers had served in Syria, many surviving the Tomahawk cruise missile attack launched by President Donald Trump in 2018 following a firefight between U.S. military and Wagner Group personnel in Syria. Many experts believe that the Wagner Group is in effect just an extension of the Russian military, as they share bases, as well as ground and air transport and logistics support, and the Russian government handles their new passports and pays them directly. The Wagner Group has also been compared with Academy, the American security firm formerly known as Blackwater. This is where the relationship enters a murky area, as Russian law explicitly prohibits illegal armed formations and mercenary groups, but at the same time, the Russian state does not prosecute numerous PMCs employing Russians and operating in Russia. The Wagner Code of Honor lists their so-called 10 Commandments, such as to protect the interests of Russia always and everywhere, to value the honor of a Russian soldier, to not fight for money but from the principle of winning always and everywhere. The Wagner Group has operated in the Middle East, South America, and Africa, most notably in Syria and more recently in Ukraine. Their role under Putin was different from Western nations using security contractors, which augment and support military forces as a method of force multiplication. Wagner's African branch was under the command of Colonel Konstantin Alexandrovich Pikalov. They specialized in being hired to train the militaries of Third World dictatorships to keep their respective despots in power, as well as providing personal security for the leaders and their entourage. The soldiers deployed by Prigozhin and Pikalov received payments, including securing deals for natural resources, such as billions of dollars worth of gold and large profits from lumber operations from the Central African Republic, diamonds from the Ivory Coast, and other high-grade ores and minerals across North and Central Africa. Additionally, the Wagner Group recruited imprisoned UPC rebels in the Central African Republic to serve and fight in Mali and Ukraine, and they are nicknamed the Black Russians. Other missions sent the group to Sudan, Mali, Mozambique, Chad, Madagascar, Lesotho, Libya, and Botswana, Zimbabwe, Angola, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau, just to name a few. Putin had stated on February 8, 2022, that the Russian state is not involved and has nothing to do with Wagner's activities in Africa, although the several tons of gold were flown into Moscow under military supervision. After Yevgeny disappeared, some say killed, others say he simply went underground, Pikalov took over primary operations. He served as a military officer in Russia's experimental military unit numbered 99795, located in the village of Storozhevo near St. Petersburg. This interesting unit was tasked, in part, with determining the effects of radioactive rays on living organisms. Following his retirement in 2012, he started a private detective agency. After years of denying his attachment to the group, Prigozhin claimed, "I cleaned the old weapons myself, sorted out the bulletproof vest myself, and found specialists who could help me with this." From that moment on, 2014, a group of patriots was born, which later came to be called the Wagner Battalion. In an interview in December 2018, Russian President Putin said, in regard to Wagner PMCs operating in Ukraine, Syria, and elsewhere, that everyone should remain within the legal framework, and that if the Wagner Group was violating the law, the Russian Prosecutor General's office should provide a legal assessment. But, according to Putin, if they did not violate Russian law, they had the right to work and promote their business interest abroad, and he denied allegations that Yevgeny Prigozhin controlled their group and actions, which have been proven false. Ironically, Prigozhin is also wanted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for conspiracy to defraud the United States and is offering a $250,000 reward for information leading to Prigozhin's arrest. He is wanted for allegedly overseeing the political and electoral interference of the St. Petersburg, Florida-based Internet Research Agency from 2014 to 2018. The claim is that the agency, of which Prigozhin was the primary funder, worked to interfere with the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The Wagner Group was used by Putin to handle covert military activities, with a plausible deniability factor, therefore not directly involving Russian forces to expand his reach and influence. The group is quite eclectic, with an international cadre from nations that made up the old Soviet Union, including many Ukrainians. The Wagner Group assisted in the 2014 incursion into the Crimea, taking that territory from Ukraine in violation of international law, as well as the actions in Chechnya and Georgia before that. They have been accused of atrocities, including mass murder and rape across Africa and alongside Russian forces in Ukraine, which Prigozhin has denied. In fact, he actually insinuated that any crimes committed were done so by the Russian army. Prigozhin flew in more than 400 men from the Central African Republic in mid to late January 2022 on a mission to assassinate Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and members of his government. Zelensky survived 3 direct assassination attempts, 2 of which were allegedly orchestrated by the Wagner Group. In 2022, Prigozhin had permission to recruit members from Russian prisons and gulags, hiring often very violent criminals focusing upon those with prior military experience. The inmates were offered 100,000 or 200,000 rubles and amnesty for 6 months of voluntary service, or 5 million rubles to their relatives if they died. On January 5, 2023, the first group of 24 prisoners recruited by Wagner to fight in Ukraine finished their 6-month contracts and were released with full amnesty for their past crimes. Wagner mercenaries were an integral part in the battles of Popasna, Lysychansk, and Severodonetsk, and capturing Svitlodarsk along with the Russian army when the atrocities were reported. But Prigozhin became discontented, and he has claimed that Russian commanders intentionally withheld their forces in supporting Wagner Group's mercenaries in some of the heaviest fighting, and for various reasons. He also supported the claims by Ukrainian soldiers and former convict prisoners of war who stated that at Bakhmut they were used as bait, as they were poorly armed and sent in human wave attacks to draw out and expose Ukrainian positions to be attacked by more experienced Russian infantry units or artillery and airstrikes. One group involved was Task Force Rusish, founded by Alexei Milchakov and Yan Petrovsky in the summer of 2014, which is a far-right extremist sabotage and assault reconnaissance unit, which has been fighting as part of the Russian separatist forces in eastern Ukraine. Their logo features a Slavic-styled swastika. They have also been accused of major war crimes. Another group are called Arkan's Tigers, under the command of Debor Savic, a Bosnian Serb, a veteran of the Kosovo War and Syria as of 2016. He was reportedly removed from command after being attacked in Luhansk and suffering shell shock. Others included Norwegian and Swedish volunteers called the Nidog, correlating to the dragon in Norse mythology. In January 2023, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić criticized Wagner for recruiting Serbian nationals and called on Russia to put an end to the practice, noting that it is a violation under Serbian law for citizens to take part in foreign armed conflicts or serve in foreign militaries. In January 2023, the Wagner Group captured the salt mine town of Soledar after heavy fighting. During the battle, Wagner reportedly surrounded Ukrainian troops in the center of the town. Hundreds of Russian and Ukrainian troops were killed in the battle for Soledar. Several days later, Wagner captured Klishchivka, south of Bakhmut, and Wagner casualties in the invasion numbered 30,000 wounded, with as many as 9,000 killed. They did send in replacements. The U.S. estimates that half those deaths occurred since the middle of December 2022, with 90% of Wagner fighters being ill-trained and ill-equipped convicts. Concurrently, the UK Ministry of Defense estimated that convicts recruited by Wagner had experienced a casualty rate of up to 50%. Most of these casualties occurred when Russian air and ground assets were not provided as support, hence Prigozhin's consternation. On May 5, 2023, Yevgeny Prigozhin blamed Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the Russian Armed Forces, General Valery Gerasimov, for the tens of thousands of Wagner casualties, saying, "They came here as volunteers and are dying so you can sit like fat cats in your luxury offices." On June 23, 2023, Prigozhin stated that Russian justifications for the invasion of Ukraine were based on lies, and he accused the Russian Defense Ministry under Shoigu of trying to deceive the society and the president and tell us how there was a crazy aggression from Ukraine and that they were planning to attack us with the whole of NATO. Another claim is that the group is not being paid according to the contractual agreements and that Russian units not actively involved in the fighting were getting priority on food and ammunition resupply operations. However, Putin released a statement on June 27, 2023 that the group had been paid $1 billion over the previous year that included future payments for their services. Prigozhin also claimed that Russian on-call air support was rarely available when he needed it, same with artillery, and that when they did arrive on several occasions, they struck his units, killing his men. Another claim by Prigozhin, and probably true, was that Russian military forces had been committing the atrocities and laying the blame on the Wagner Group to deflect any responsibility. Eyewitnesses in Ukraine tend to support this assertion, although Wagner has been accused of such crimes by the Ukrainians. Prigozhin was apparently upset with the blame being placed on his units. The lack of support by Russian forces creating the heavy casualties created the desertions and surrenders of Wagner soldiers. Prigozhin's Wagner forces left Ukraine and marched into Russia, seizing control of the Russian military headquarters for the southern region in Rostov-on-Don, which oversees the fighting in Ukraine. On June 23rd, the group was driving towards Moscow, but the mutiny was halted the next day, June 24th, when the deal was brokered by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. And on that day, a statement came that Yevgeny Prigozhin was accused by the Russian government of organizing an armed uprising after he threatened to attack Russian forces in response to a claimed airstrike on his paramilitary soldiers. Prigozhin believed that the airstrike on his troops was Putin's attempt to 1. Not have to pay them their money, 2. Blame dead men on the atrocities committed by Russian soldiers, 3. Possibly use the airstrikes as a way of working out a ceasefire with Ukraine by taking credit for stopping the mass murders in a false flag operation, and 4. Since Wagner is a designated terrorist organization by the US, UK, EU, and UN, it allowed his commanders to give some distance from their reported actions. The reports are that many Wagner Group soldiers have deserted and joined Ukrainian forces or fled the country, not trusting the Russians. It has been reported that these defectors gave the locations of mass murder and burial sites, naming the Russian commanders responsible for war crimes. In response, the Russian security forces accused Prigozhin of launching a military coup attempt as he pledged a march of justice against the Russian army in retaliation. As a result, Putin was forced to admit that he hired Wagner, meaning that whether or not Wagner committed war crimes, they are now responsible due to the connection. Putin's response to the revolt was, "All those who prepared the rebellion will suffer inevitable punishment. The armed forces and other government agencies have received the necessary orders." Prigozhin and his convoy were well received by both Ukrainians and Russians as they advanced towards Moscow, troubling Putin, who realized that he had a challenge to his authority. But why would Prigozhin risk such a bold move? One may assume that he would only have taken such a chance if he believed that he had high-level support from Russian military leaders who would be glad to get rid of Putin. Either that, or he believed that the soldiers would mutiny against their commanders and join the coup. As a way of saving face and diffusing the situation, Putin offered to forgive treason charges against Prigozhin, giving him immunity, which otherwise would mean a death penalty. Yet Putin never said that he would not pursue him on other charges such as extortion, theft, tax evasion, and corruption. Prigozhin fled to Belarus when that country's president offered him asylum, but he must know that he is still not safe there, since they have an extradition treaty with Russia and Lukashenko is friends with Putin. There are rumors that he may try and come to the United States despite the many charges he would face. The United States does not have an extradition treaty with Russia. He may feel that surrendering to U.S. authorities and making a deal is better than the alternative. Prigozhin would be a prime witness against Putin and his field commanders who are charged with war crimes themselves. Who knows? Time will tell.
Мы разворачиваем свои колонны и уходим в обратном направлении в полевые лагеря согласно плану.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like, subscribe, and share. Send us comments and show ideas, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.